podcast this week. We're so excited to have you continue to listen based on our podcast last week, which is more a discussion based on tipping. We had a few comments, which were great to see the engagement, and we appreciate any feedback, any questions, so we encourage you to keep doing that. So thanks.
We actually had a really busy week this past week. I'm not sure how many of you guys were following us on social media or our Rejuviderm social media, but we're hosting our yearly event called You by Rejuviderm. And it's an amazing experience because we get to see not only our previous and loyal customers, but we get to meet all these new people, new faces, just introduce ourselves, introduce what we do, answer any questions. It's a very social thing, but it's an awesome opportunity because it's kind of once a year where we can actually give discounts, and it was kind of crazy this year actually. The discounts were amazing, but yeah, it was really exciting, and so we were a little bit busy with that, so we have to apologize. This has been a little bit late and delayed because of our event.
Yeah, so we had our event last week, which was, like Michelle said, very busy, very exciting. Great to meet new faces and bring new clients into the clinic while celebrating our loyal clients. So it seems like this is an increasing trend in the industry to celebrate loyalty and bringing new clients in, which is great.
Yeah, and an awesome opportunity to also learn about all these new technologies out there. Not everyone knows that when they come in and they can ask questions about kind of anything, and sometimes we don't know what you guys are missing. So it's kind of an awesome opportunity to kind of go and see what we all have to offer, and to see, that there might be something out there that you didn't even know existed.
Exactly. Yeah, not just injectables. We had all our laser techs out, medical estheticians, all these things, answering lots of questions. And as we know, we see the best results when we do all these modalities together. So it's great to kind of incorporate them all into your routine.
Yeah. It's also a really great opportunity for us to give back to our community. We raised quite a bit of money for a local Edmonton charity, the Edmonton Food Bank here this year. And yeah, we're really excited to be able to share with the charity this year. So thank you for all of your donations as well, for those people who did donate. Yeah. Another update we do have, in case you're wondering, is we had better luck this week with pickleball. It's very important to us, so this week we definitely made up for our losses last week.
Yes, I know that's what you all want to hear about. 2 peas in a pickle are in 3rd place right now, so fingers crossed we can bump up in the rankings next week.
We'll keep you updated. Don't worry. Edge of your seat.
So moving on to our topic for this week, we're going to go a little bit more back into the skills-based realm this week. So we're going to focus on Botox injections or neuromodulator injections in the lower face.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that. I think that it's a thing in the industry that a lot of times we refer to neurotoxins or neuromodulators as Botox just because it's so easy, and also people understand when you're talking about Botox. They don't always understand when you say neuromodulators or neurotoxins. So if you hear us say Botox, we don't necessarily mean just Botox the brand. We carry 5 different brands here, but sometimes it's just easy, and it kind of slips. I think that's a very common thing in the industry, that it just kind of slips out that we say Botox. We do mean neuromodulators. We carry all different brands here, and we can talk a little bit, maybe at a different podcast, about the different ones and why you might want to choose one over the other. But today we are referring to all neuromodulators, but we might say Botox a few times, so disclaimer.
Forgive us. Yes. So as we mentioned, today we're going to kind of isolate one area in the lower face. So today we're going to focus really on the chin area and more the depressor muscles of the mouth. And later in other episodes, we'll talk more in depth about some elevator muscles around this area, and then also your masseter and platysmal bands. We'll talk a little bit about them today, but we will go more in depth in the future.
So it's just a broad topic to cover, so we really want to hone in on the chin, just because this is a very common area to be treated when you come in, and it's a very hard area to landmark as well. So it's good to know the depths, it's good to know the placement, it's good to know also what expressions you're going to want to get your patient to do in order to isolate those muscles.
Exactly. So I don't know about you, Michelle, but a lot of the time I find people that are coming in new for neuromodulator injections are looking more at upper face. So they're coming in for their frown lines, their crow's feet, their forehead lines, and a lot of the time people neglect the lower face, which I feel like is a great area to start injecting, especially if you're looking at the face as a whole, because a lot of the time it can look almost unnatural if you have a lot of movement in certain areas in your lower face, but you're treating fully your upper face. So if we're looking holistically, it's important to remember that the lower face is another area you can add those neuromodulators to kind of help smooth things out and make things look more whole.
And I think a big reason why is like education and exposure for clients. They know kind of Botox or neuromodulators really work on the upper face, and not everyone knows that you can treat the lower face with them. But I also think that the lower face muscles don't always create creasing. And so people come in because they have these new lines developing, especially kind of in between here, lines around their eyes, and so they want to soften those lines out. In the lower face, you don't actually get too many creases from the muscle activity. So people come in a lot of times. Like a common concern I have, especially with people that are aging, I'd say about 40 and above, is when they start to notice this, is the corners of their mouth start to go down. So they start to say that I look sad, or people are asking me what's wrong, and nothing's wrong. I'm not sad, but I'm starting to look sad, or I'm starting to look like my mother. I hear that all the time in the corners of their mouth. And so, or another one is chin dimpling and chin crumpling when they're talking or expressing, or even in photos they'll notice it. It's another reason why people kind of come in to discuss the lower face, but they don't always know that you can treat it with a neurotoxin.
Exactly. I think a lot of people come in looking for filler in that area, which can help with some of those things as well, but commonly we can really help with those issues with just a little bit of Botox. It's not even that high of dosing. It's just a nice add-on to your current treatment.
It is a very low dose in that area as well, because they are very reactive muscles. The one thing with that, the one downside is it doesn't last quite as long as areas like in the forehead, like in between the brows will last a lot longer. We use these muscles a lot, so you process through it quicker. And if you use too much of it, you can have some, some cosmetic outcomes that you might not like. So we'll discuss that at length in a little bit.
Exactly. Like Michelle said, we're talking, we're eating, we're drinking. Everything we do is with the muscles around this area of our mouth. So they do metabolize or move through the product much faster than other areas of the face. So you will notice, like she said, that it wears off a little bit quicker, but it can be very impactful.
Yes. And a huge thing, especially in the lower face, is prevention. And this is what we talk a lot about with our clients with neurotoxins in general, is the prevention aspect. But I find the lower face, it's extremely important, especially because one of the muscles that we will talk about, it definitely gets shorter and tighter as we age, and it's one of the only muscles in the face that does that really gets a lot tighter. So if we can prevent that at a younger age as we move through, then your outcomes later on, you'll be very thankful for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so now we're going to move a little bit more to a video portion. So Michelle's going to be actually assessing my lower face. So we're going to show you how to assess the lower face, how to get clients to engage those muscles so you can landmark them. So we'll show you how to landmark them, where the muscles are, where the injection points for those muscles will be, and we'll talk a little bit about dosing. Then we'll come back and talk about some potential complications of injecting the lower face, and then finish off the podcast. Okay.
First, you want to assess your patient. You can see here that Kelsey has a small scar, and this can impact the distribution of the toxin. So I'm marking out the orbicularis oris muscle here, so you get your patient to pucker. And it's a round circular muscle that lays superficial to the skin, and it's a thinner muscle. This is the muscle we use to treat for a lip flip, but we will not be discussing this in depth in this video.
Now Michelle's going to mark the muscles of the chin, which is what we're discussing in this video. First, she's going to get me to frown and then mark out my depressor angularis oris, which comes off the corner of the mouth down to the mandibular bone. So she's marking my right side here, and then she's going to move and mark my left side. There's two ways to inject this muscle. It inserts deeply to the mandibular bone. So if you are injecting lower to that bone, you want to go at about a medium depth to avoid hitting the DLI. Or you can inject a little bit higher up, closer to the corner of the mouth at a more superficial depth. We find this gives a better result clinically and less risk of hitting the DLI.
Next is the mentalis muscle. So you get the patient to evert their bottom lip, and where you can either see or feel the dimpling is where you want to treat. This muscle inserts into the soft tissue, so again, a medium depth is important here. In order to, again, avoid the DLI, you want to treat a little bit more central and lower to that mandibular bone.
Here we're going to show you how to mark the DLI, which is a muscle you want to avoid. So you get the patient to grimace, and then Michelle's marking it out here. So this is a muscle we usually want to avoid in most patients because it can cause a little bit of an elevation of the more medial lower lip. As mentioned before, this muscle runs deep to the DAO, so it is important we be careful with our depth while injecting the DAO.
Typical dosing includes 2 to 5 units per side for the DAO, 2 to 6 units per side for the mentalis, and if you need to treat the DLI, 0.5.
So we just saw the video of Michelle landmarking, showing us our injection sites and dosing. So now we're going to talk a little bit about potential complications, which there are in any area of the face that you're injecting. So a lot of these have to do with, can be associated with the depth you're injecting, the location you're injecting, the dose you're injecting, but also a lot of it has to do with post-care. So when the patients go home, we give you a list of things that we want you to avoid for the rest of the day, and a lot of that is to prevent any movement of the Botox. So your face has over 40 muscles, and it's one of those rare areas in the body that the muscle can actually attach to other muscle, and they can be very close together in a small area. So if you're moving that area, if you're putting pressure on that area, any significant exercise, we can see that product move and affect other muscles that we're actually not wanting to target. And some of those muscles can cause some unwanted cosmetic effects.
Yeah. And because these muscles are so reactive to a very small amount, you will see them easier than you'll see in some other areas, like into the forehead and around the eyes, if that happens to migrate as well. You'll notice it a lot more into the chin. So I think it's very important as injectors to remember the layering of the face. The face is not only 2D, 3D, so we have to really consider the depth of the muscle and how those muscles, especially in the chin, they really overlap. So to know your depth and insertion points related to the depth is very, very key. So one common thing that I see with DAO muscle, so that's that triangular muscle here that pulls down on the corners of our lip or of our mouth, is that if you over-treat it, you will actually get the corners of your mouth to turn up, and you look a little bit like a joker. And I've seen it before. Actually, my first patient, my poor sister, who I ever first practiced this on years ago, I did a little bit too much into her, and it was comical to see because she couldn't at rest get her smile to go flat, so the corners of her mouth were raised. So I'll never forget that. So you have to be very careful with the dosing amount, and sometimes it's even 0.5 of a unit that will push you over that edge. So start slow, start low. You can always add more.
Absolutely, that's a great point. Another thing is people really rely on their smile for expression. It also creates a uniqueness about us all. And if you impact someone's smile, it's very noticeable to that person and people that know them. Because you can really see a difference. And a lot of people have a hard time adjusting to that. So it is very important to start low. You can always get these people back in 2 to 3 weeks, see how it's affected that muscle, and then add more if you need. But I would definitely recommend starting lower in a lot of the lower face muscles to create less of an effect. Any impact on the smile is going to be very, very noticeable to the patient, and a lot of people do not like any change to their smile.
Yeah, because you feel it. You can definitely feel the toxin in this area much more than you can other areas. So one thing that I also commonly have are patients that come in that have a naturally crooked smile. And a lot of times we'll see that in the lower face here, that maybe one of their lips pulls up slightly and the other one dips down. And I actually have a very crooked smile myself, very naturally. And I've tweaked it a few times on myself. I've done it for a few patients. And honestly, even though sometimes we can get to complete symmetry at rest, when you're in motion, it doesn't always feel or look as natural either. So sometimes I find that really a trial and error, and a lot of patients don't actually enjoy having complete symmetry in their lips if it means that they have a decrease in movement in one side to the next, because you can definitely see that in larger motion. So if you're really laughing or really smiling, sometimes you'll see that impact because things come at a cost. Neurotoxins, they're a paralytic, so they do affect how your muscle functions. So even if you have some symmetry issues, having one side that doesn't work as well as the other side, even though it's more symmetrical, people don't always like it. So keep that in mind, that symmetry is not always best. Sometimes having the natural movement of your mouth is more attractive and is a better result for the patient in general. But trial and error. But again, very very small amounts, because you can always add more. You can't take it out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then another area that we discuss in the video is your DAO, which Michelle was talking about, the triangular muscle that pulls down the corner of your lip. Depending on where you're injecting that muscle and dosing, as well as if you get any movement, there is another muscle there that's a depressor muscle called your DLI that pulls your lip down more towards the center of your lip.
It can kind of lift you up in this area. So there's different ways, depending on where it is treated, that it can impact your lower lip. I find unless I'm dealing with patients with Bell's palsy, I avoid the DLI completely. Even if they have natural asymmetry there, even for a little bit of correction. I only really treat it in patients with Bell's palsy now.
Yes.
But it is an area that you want to avoid. So definitely know your depths, because it overlaps with the DAO and your orbicularis as well.
Exactly. So it's something that most of the time in most patients, like Michelle said, you're not actually wanting to treat that muscle unless there's a rare indication like Bell's palsy.
Yeah.
So it's something you want to avoid in most patients.
Yeah. The mentalis muscles, I think there's a little bit more freedom with it, with where you landmark and where you go, because there's no other overlap of muscles. But if you go a little bit too lateral, then you can hit the DLI. So that's the one thing, especially if you're using a toxin in higher amounts that has a larger spread, you're going to want to stay a little bit slightly more medial.
Exactly. Yeah. More central. I've seen also a lot of people, one of the reasons we treat the mentalis is for that pebbling, or pomme d'orange, they call it, the little craters in the chin, with movement or at rest over time. And I've seen a lot of people online, especially, treating much more superficially all throughout the chin to hit those craters. However, we want to really respect the anatomy of that muscle, and the insertion point of that mentalis muscle is deep to the bone, the mandible bone. So that's where we're wanting to aim the Botox, which will help with all of the pebbling throughout the chin if you're dosing it correctly.
Yeah, if you hit it into the belly of the muscle in that area, it's going to be the most impactful, and all those other pokes are really, truly unnecessary.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so this could be a topic we realize that brings up a lot of questions, which we're hoping for. So please feel free to comment, message us directly, whatever way you want to get in contact with us. If you have any questions, comments, we are happy to answer. We'll kind of hold them and come up with good responses for you for our next episode. So we'll always start our next episode with questions from the previous week. So please feel free to reach out. We would love to hear from you.
And not only questions, but definitely comments too. If you guys have different experiences, sometimes, this is a terrible saying, but there's many ways to skin a cat. So sometimes you can actually hit the same, very similar end result. There might be plus or minuses of how you approach it, but this is how we approach it, based on science, based on anatomy, and based on our clinical knowledge. But we're definitely open to comments, to what your experiences are, or maybe like little clinical pearls that you've discovered as well with the lower face. So yeah, let us know.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. We'll see you again next week.